You spend 40 years building a large RRSP, then you retire, start watching retirement videos on YouTube, and suddenly everyone is telling you the same thing. Start melting down your RRSP. Pay the tax now. Avoid bigger taxes later. Sounds reasonable. But what if I told you I recently ran 2 retirement projections for the same hypothetical retiree? Same age, same spending, same investments. Only difference was how aggressively they withdrew from their RRSP. And 35 years later, one strategy left the retiree with almost $300,000 more than the other. The surprising part? It's not the person you think. It's your favourite Scotsman here again, and today I want to show you where RRSP meltdown strategies can help, where they can hurt, and why some retirees become so focused on avoiding future taxes that they accidentally end up with less money. At first glance, RRSP meltdown strategies make a lot of sense. After all, an RRSP isn't really tax-free money, it's tax-deferred money. And if you've accumulated a large RRSP, you've probably heard some version of the same argument. If you wait too long, you'll end up with huge RRIF withdrawals. If your RRSP keeps growing, you'll pay more tax later. You could lose some of your OAS to clawbacks. And if you pass away with a large RRSP, CRA could end up becoming one of your biggest beneficiaries. To be fair, none of those concerns are made up. They are all very real. So, it's easy to see why so many retirees become interested in RRSP meltdown strategies. The logic seems straightforward. Take money out earlier, pay tax at lower rates, reduce future RRIF balances, reduce future tax problems. Simple. But here's the question most people never ask. What if reducing your future taxes doesn't actually leave you with more money? Because those are not necessarily the same thing, and that's where things get interesting. Let's look at an example. We'll call him Kenny Dalglish. Kenny is 60 years old. He's got 800,000 in his RRSP, 100,000 in a TFSA, 100,000 in a non-registered investment account. So in total, he's sitting on about $1 million of investments. He's retired, he doesn't have a pension. He plans to start CPP and OAS at 65, and he's Scottish, so he's pretty tight with his money. He only needs about 50,000 a year to support his lifestyle. His goal is maximising what eventually goes to his daughter. For this illustration, we're assuming a 5% annual rate of return, 2% inflation, and we're using current tax rules. Now, before we go any further, let me say something important. This isn't meant to be a recommendation. It's not a perfect financial plan. We're simply testing an idea. The idea is this. If Kenny is worried about future taxes, should he start aggressively drawing down his RRSP now, or is he better off taking a more measured approach? So we ran 2 different versions of Kenny's retirement plan. In the first version, Kenny follows what I call a conservative withdrawal strategy. In the second version, he follows a much more aggressive RRSP meltdown strategy. And the results ended up being very different. Let's start with the conservative strategy. Under this approach, Kenny isn't trying to aggressively drain his RRSP. Instead, each year he withdraws enough from his RRSP to fully use the lowest tax bracket available to him in Ontario. The thinking is fairly straightforward. If he's going to withdraw the money anyway, he might as well take advantage of those lower tax rates while they're available. He follows that approach until age 72. At that point, he switches to taking only the minimum RRIF withdrawals required by the government. In other words, he's taking advantage of lower tax brackets today, but he's not trying to rush the RRSP drawdown. He's allowing a large portion of the RRSP to continue growing for future years. It's a fairly balanced approach, and probably not too far from what many planners would recommend. Now, let's look at the aggressive approach. Instead of withdrawing using the lowest tax bracket, Kenny withdraws enough each year to fully use the 29.65% tax bracket. In plain English, he's pulling a lot more out of his RRSP while he's in his 60s and early 70s. The idea is simple. Pay more tax now, so there's less RRSP to create tax problems later. Eventually, the RRSP is completely depleted. And if you're a fan of RRSP meltdown strategies, this is probably the point where you're thinking, well, surely this one wins. And this is where most people get the answer wrong. If we put both projections on the screen, the aggressive RRSP meltdown strategy actually looks pretty good at first. In fact, through much of Kenny's 70s and into his early 80s, it produces a higher after-tax estate value. Kenny passed away relatively early. His daughter might actually receive more money under the aggressive strategy. And that's exactly why these strategies can be so appealing. But there's one problem. Kenny's healthy. longevity runs in his family. And retirement planning isn't about winning at age 75 or 80. It's about winning over your entire lifetime. As the years go by, the picture starts to change. The conservative strategy keeps more money growing inside the RRSP. The aggressive strategy has already paid a significant amount of tax to get that money out earlier. Eventually, those lines cross, and by age 95, the difference is dramatic. The conservative strategy leaves Kenny's estate worth roughly $948,000 after tax. The aggressive strategy leaves roughly $662,000. That's almost $300,000 less going to his daughter. Same retiree, same spending, same investments, just a completely different withdrawal strategy. Now, does that mean RRSP meltdowns are a bad idea? Not at all. Before we move on, if you're trying to figure out how decisions like this fit into your own retirement plan, I've put together a free retirement guide for Canadians approaching retirement. You can grab it from the link in the pinned comment below. Okay, back to it. What Kenny's example shows is that the goal isn't to drain the RRSP. The goal is to maximise what you keep after tax. But before you decide to leave your RRSP alone, let me show you another situation where the opposite problem came up. Meet Wayne and Coleen Rooney. They're both 65 years old. They have about 1.7 million in RRSPs. They're collecting CPP and OAS, and they need about 80,000 a year to support their lifestyle. Now, at first glance, they look like the perfect example of why you shouldn't aggressively draw down an RRSP. But there's one detail that changes everything. In this projection, Wayne passes away at age 75. And when one spouse dies, a lot more changes than people realise. You don't just lose a spouse, you lose a tax return, you lose a set of tax brackets, and you lose an OAS clawback threshold. Problem is that a couple can often live comfortably with a large RRIF. A surviving spouse may not. That's where large RRIF balances can start causing problems. So, once again, we compared the two approaches. One strategy focused on keeping withdrawals relatively low. The other accelerated RRSP withdrawals earlier in retirement. And this time, the results tell a very different story. Unlike Kenny's situation, the more aggressive withdrawal strategy actually helped. By drawing down more of the RRSP before Wayne passed away, Coleen was left with a smaller RRIF balance to manage on her own. This meant less taxable income later in life. It also meant she was able to keep more of her old age security. In the lower withdrawal scenario, a larger RRIF remained after Wayne's death, creating more taxable income for the surviving spouse and leading to more OAS clawback. The difference isn't that one strategy magically eliminated taxes. The difference is that it reduced a tax problem that was waiting further down the road. And that's really the point. Kenny's problem was paying too much tax too soon. Wayne and Coleen's problem was potentially paying too much tax too late. Same strategy, different outcome, different objective. And that's why retirement planning is rarely as simple as always melt down your RRSP or never touch your RRSPs. The answer depends on what problem you're actually trying to solve. And that's why I think a lot of retirees get RRSP meltdowns wrong. They become focused on the strategy itself, but a strategy isn't a goal. The goal is the outcome. Kenny's goal was leaving as much money as possible to his daughter. Wayne and Coleen's goal was avoiding future tax problems for the surviving spouse. Different goals, different solutions. That's why there isn't a magic RRSP withdrawal formula that works for everyone. The right answer depends on your income, your assets, your family situation, your health, and what it is you're actually trying to accomplish. So, if someone tells you that every RRSP should be melted down, be careful. And if someone tells you should never touch your RRSP early, be equally careful. Retirement planning isn't about winning a battle with a CRA. It's about making the right trade-offs, and that's usually where the best plans are found. And if you'd like help thinking through these trade-offs, don't forget to download your free retirement guide. And in the next video, I want to tackle another retirement question that gets a lot of Canadians into trouble. Not when to withdraw from your RRSP, but which account should you spend first in retirement? Because the answer isn't nearly as obvious as most people think.